inside.
Let's call the meeting to order. We are all present except Tammy. Tammy will be absent this evening. The invocation this evening will be given by Derwin, and the flag salute, Colonel, or Captain, would you give us, Joe, how about flag salute? Yes. Chief.
Whoever.
Yeah, I'll get it straight before long. Chief, would you lead us in flag salute? Derwin?
Will you bow your heads? Dear Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you for waking us up this morning, watching over us, protecting us, shielding us. Lord, we thank you for the activities of our limbs. We thank you for our minds. God, we're asking you right now in the name of Jesus to come in and touch us. Be with us, lead us, and guide us. Give us wisdom on the decisions that we're about to make. And Lord, we're asking you to bless this city, bless this state, and bless the United States of America. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4, consider approval of minutes of the regular commission meeting of May 1, 2018, special meeting of May the 3rd, 2018.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ron, second by Jonathan. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 5, awards, presentations, proclamations, and organizational business. Item 5.1, present the pet available for adoption at the city animal shelter.
Size guy there.
Hi, good evening. I'm Charlotte Ringwald. I'm the adoption coordinator at Enid Animal Control. And tonight my friend here is Pork Chop. Pork Chop, that's the name he liked when I called some names at him. He rolled over. So Pork Chop is in pen 22, and he's a 1-year-old male, Staffordshire, so pit bull. And he is looking for a new home. He seems pretty dog friendly, and he loves to roll around in the grass. So he's looking for a family that'll take him outside and play around with him. We've got lots and lots of cats and dogs available. We try to keep them moving, but we need those shares and likes and people to come out and adopt. So come by and see us and visit Pork Chop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Item 6, hearings. Item 6.1, conduct a public hearing on the proposed 2018-2019 City of Enid budget and related authorities' financial plans. Aaron?
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, as part of the Municipal Budget Act, we are required to have a budget hearing to allow public input. It has to occur 15 days before the start of the fiscal new year and be advertised at least 5 days prior to that. And it was advertised the 15th of May in the Enid News and Eagle for people to come and speak regarding the budget. Is there anyone signed up to speak?
Not on that particular item. Hearing none. Item 7, administration. Item 7.1, consider resolution approving, adopting, and appropriating the 2018-2019 fiscal year budget for the City of Enid, Oklahoma. Approving the fiscal year 2018-2019 fiscal plan, or financial plan for the Advanced Development Authority. Authorizing the city manager, his designee, to make fund transfers as provided in the Municipal Budget Act. And authorizing the chief financial officer to invest the city's funds as provided in Oklahoma Statute Title 62, Section 348.1. Aaron?
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, as you know, April 27th, we passed out the draft of the budget. We've had 3 special sessions to discuss all the items contained within that budget document, and tonight we're asking for approval of the fiscal year 19 budget document.
I'd like to discuss an item in the, regarding the ERDA funding, but is item 14 on our agenda the appropriate place for that, Aaron? The EEDA companion item?
Yes.
Okay, I'll sit on that for the moment.
I do have one item that I've discussed with the city manager that I would like to see added to the budget, and that's an amount of funds to demolish the building that we own downtown in the area, behind the convention hall, behind the event center. We bought that building about, 3 years ago?
Yeah, sounds about right.
And we bought it with the intent of, creating additional green space there. And it's not an attractive building. And I would like to see us take it down because eventually we're going to, have that whole area cleared all the way to Garriott. And this building isn't generating any revenue. And to me, it just needs to be taken out of there. And Gerald indicated he thinks it might cost as much as $100,000 to demolish it. Or, I'm assuming the city's got equipment that they could take it down themselves if they had the manpower to do it.
Demolition is a specialized thing. We don't specialize in demolition. However, we have people in town that do. Commissioner, when we talked about it, $100,000 was a guess. I don't know what it will cost. It's a solid building. I do know that ultimately it was purchased to tear down, as you said, to make way for green space. We can do that. We just haven't done that before because specifically it wasn't line itemed in the budget. And we do have a use for that. We use it to store city vehicles at this point. However, we knew that was a temporary use. If you want to add it to the budget, there's certainly, I believe there's funds to do that. If
I would like to make a motion to add that to the budget, because like I say, if it was an attractive building, it'd be a different matter, but I think it's homely and needs to be gone.
Where would you want to, what part of the budget would you want to add it to, Aaron?
Where's that building, EEDA asset? I think it is. So it would need to be under the Economic Development Authority who owns the building.
So would you want
14?
to move that to,
That would be under a different section too.
Yes.
well, we think we would fund that through,
EMA or?
It would ultimately need to go through EEDA, who owns the asset of the building. The funding would have to come from the municipal authority, which would also change the municipal authority budget. There are no fund balance in EEDA to be able to do that.
so in the general fund, the other departments, there's nothing to amend to affect tearing down that building. So we can accomplish what you're talking about later on in the agenda, if that's,
We need to do it under item 10 to provide the funding under the EMA, sorry, item 11.1, the budget resolution for the EMA.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. I just didn't want to miss out on my opportunity.
I understand.
Make sure you bring up item 10 when I get there.
All right.
Item 7.2.
Oh, I move to approve the resolution.
Second. Motion by Ben, and second by George. Please cast your vote. Keeping you on your toes, Ben.
Appreciate that.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 7.2, consider an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 5, Public Safety, Chapter 6, Minors, Article A, to rename the article Tobacco and Vapor Products, to amend Section 5-6A-1, definitions, to add vapor products and remove tobacco vending machines, to repeal Sections 5-6A-2, tobacco vending machines, and create Sections 5-6A-2, purchase or possession by minors of tobacco or vapor products, to provide penalty for possession purchase, or use of fraudulent identification to amend Section 5-6A-3, furnishing tobacco or vapor products to minors to include vapor products. To repeal Sections 5-6A-4-4, purchase, receipt, or possession by minors. 5-6A-5, display of tobacco age restriction signage. 5-6A-6, public access to tobacco products. 5-6A-7, tobacco paraphernalia due to state government's preemption. Providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, codification, and declaring an emergency.
Mayor, my department was asked to expedite, if possible, passage of an ordinance to allow for the prosecution of minors who possess these vapor products. In preparing that, I determined that the ABLE Commission has preempted the field in a variety of specific tobacco and vapor-related offenses, including tobacco vending machines and the size of print on signs that would alert minors that they are not to have vapor products or tobacco. So this repeals the ones that the ABLE Commission has preempted. It adds in the vapor products so that the police can bring the vapor product offenses through municipal court, which is a better venue than state court. And the emergency, if you pass the ordinance, we would like you to consider the emergency clause so that it could go into effect, the repeals and the prosecution immediately upon publication rather than in 30 days. An emergency clause would need a unanimous because it requires 6, and we don't have Ms. Wilson tonight.
Move to approve.
Motion by Ben to approve.
Mayor, one question, if I may. Carol, what is
Ron.
tobacco? Are we waiting on a second?
Let's have a second. Then
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Ben, a second by...
What is tobacco paraphernalia?
Tobacco paraphernalia is probably very similar to certain types of marijuana paraphernalia. I'm assuming it's rolling papers, and it could be pipes and things like that. But they have exempted, they have preempted our enforcement of that, except at in district court at the state level. ABLE Commission is now taking care of that, as well as Low Point beer, High Point beer, wine, and the other matters.
I didn't realize there was any restriction on selling pipes to people that had to be a certain age to buy a pipe.
I'm assuming that anything related to the ability to smoke tobacco would be considered paraphernalia, and if you're under 18, I suppose you could be charged with paraphernalia. Now, in reality, I have never seen a tobacco paraphernalia charge.
I don't imagine it's going to affect me anyway.
Probably not, unless you have grandchildren.
Great-grandchildren. What's the penalty that goes with that charge, paraphernalia?
Let's see. When it was allowed for us to do it, it was a $100 fine.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0.
I move to approve the emergency.
Second?
Got a motion to approve emergency by Ben, second by Ron. Everybody know what that means? Okay, please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 7.2. Nope, that was what we just took. Good. Item 7.3, consider an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 6, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Chapter 5, Driving Rules to repeal Section 6-5-6, driving under influence of liquor, drugs, or other substances, or combination thereof due to state preemption, providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, and declaring an emergency. Carol?
The state has preempted municipalities that do not have a court of record. We're too small to have a court of record. From prosecuting driving under the influence or driving while impaired. We've not utilized these charges. They involve a lot of evidence, and being a court not of record, it would mean that if we got a prosecution, we spent the time to prosecute, then they get a trial de novo in district court, and that's difficult to get that, and so we've never really done them. However, we have the ordinance in place, and because we are now preempted, this repeals it. And if repeal, we have not been, the police have not been bringing them to municipal court. So I put an emergency in because we should repeal it. And it would take effect immediately if it is, if it passes with an emergency, which would need the 6 votes. But we are not, in the meantime, in the 30 days in between, are going to suddenly prosecute people for either one of these very serious offenses.
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Ben.
Second.
Second by George. Further discussion? Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. 7.4.
I'm not sure that needs an emergency.
Very well.
Okay.
If anybody else wants to make the motion, I'm not sure that it,
Yeah. If it hasn't been used before, it's probably not going to be used in the next 30 days.
yeah.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Okay. Item 7.4, consider an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 5, Public Safety, Chapter 3, Emergency Management, Section 5-3-10, penalty to change the penalty from a Class A offense to maximum fine of $500, providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification.
As you know, we used to have a class offense schedule. We don't anymore, and we are still cleaning up the code of these important offenses, but that do not happen very often. This one would be if we had an emergency and we declared martial law or did special emergency management curfews or something. If you violated that, this would be the offense. That if you violated some measure involving our emergency management, like you broke through a safety zone where there was high water rising or something like that, this is the offense that would be utilized by the police.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ben, second by Jonathan. Further discussion? Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 5, consider an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 5, Public Safety, Chapter 8, Noise, Section 5-8-1, Sound Amplification, to change the fine from $750 to $200, providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ben, a second by Ron. Further discussion, please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 7.6, consider an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 7, Public Ways and Property, Chapter 9, Community Antenna Television System, Section 7-9-6, Offenses, to change the penalty from a Class A offense to a maximum fine of $500, providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ron, second by George. Further discussion? Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 7.7, consider approval of a contract with Motorola Solutions for a 10-year contract to provide 911 services for Enid, Garfield, Major County, their 911 system.
Okay, about 5 years ago, we upgraded our system. At that time, AT&T was essentially our provider. Since that and it was a 5-year contract. So our contract came to an end in February of this year. So we're not re-upping our contract with AT&T. We did some investigation and found that there were other vendors now that were providing enhanced 911. And we found that Motorola or Enid CallWorks was the product that best suited us. All the 3 products that we looked at, and we went on scene to other places down in southwest Oklahoma. I know Lawton is putting this particular system in, has been using what they call emergency CallWorks. It is a Motorola product. Everybody's aware of Motorola. This particular contract will be a 10-year contract as opposed to a 5-year contract. The contract is for $469,850.73. This will replace our current contract with AT&T. It allows for the 10-year contracts. We don't have to renew every 5 years. This will move our 911 system from what is called a hosted solution with AT&T. Essentially, they host it down in Shawnee and then run phone lines into our system, and everything kind of runs through there. We'll go back to what we used to be, where everything is hosted at the police department in the basement. This will allow for when Major County gets a 911 call, it'll go through our system, and now we will not have to touch it. Garfield County will not have to touch it. It'll go straight through to them, save some time for their constituents on answering times, and increase their response time, or reduce their response time. By going with the 10-year contract, AT&T's, 4 years ago, AT&T's was $475,000. So every 5 years, it'd be $475,000. So by doing a 10-year contract with Emergency CallWorks, which is the only one that offered a 10-year contract, we'll save about $517,000 over that 10-year period. We pay it off in 7 years, and then the last 3 years, we could save that money for renewing or purchasing a new system without having to maybe finance it like we do now. Any questions?
Is there a lot of hardware that you have to buy, or is it all software, or what?
The actual 911 system is essentially basically phone lines,
Right.
alley circuits that go into computers that we have in the 911 center, which includes what they call ANI and alley information, which basically is location and number identification, which gives us a subscriber information that will then plot that information to a map so that we can respond quicker and with different layers. This particular system that we're looking at Motorola does that. AT&T still has to provide the phone lines because they're a sole source provider on that particular.
It says it also covers Garfield and Major County. Are they picking up any of the funds, or do we pay all of it?
We receive all the 911s from Enid and Garfield County, and 90% of the funds from Major County, which is about $140,000 to $160,000 per year.
Thank you.
Explain the payment amount, the $475,000.
Okay, $475,000 was what AT&T charged us to provide the 911 service. Essentially, without the phone lines, which was extra, the 5 computers that we have, the mapping system, and the database
Is
services.
that for 1 year or 5?
That's for 5 years.
Okay, good.
So with CallWorks, it expands it to a 10-year contract,
Sure.
which costs us only $469,000 and some change. So we save about $500,000. Any more questions?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
Motion by Ben, second by George. Discussion. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 7.8, consider approval of a contract with AT&T for a 36-month contract on network and database services provided by the Enid, Garfield, Major County 911 system.
Okay, as I said before, AT&T is a sole source provider for all the database services for Garfield and Major County. There is no other vendor that does that. They also, essentially all the physical phone lines for 911 is provided by AT&T. By doing a 36-month contract, we reduce the cost of those things from $90 a month to $65 a month. So in Garfield County, if we stayed at 90 months, it would cost us $8,640 to go month to month per year. If we do a 36-month contract, it only costs us $6,240.
Move to
So,
approve.
Second?
I have a question.
yes, sir.
What happens if you take on Alfalfa County?
We would get their funds. We've talked to Alfalfa County. They're not ready to do anything right now. There's some political things to be considered, and hopefully they'll make some decisions later on the
Could
next
happen
couple
in
of years.
like to happen in 3 years.
We can always hope.
Who made the motion? Ben? Jonathan?
Second.
Second. Further discussion. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 8, consent items.
Move to approve.
Motion by Ben to approve.
Second?
Second by George. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 9, we will now recess to convene as the Enid Municipal Authority. Item 10, all of the trustees of the Enid Municipal Authority rescheduled regular meeting are in attendance, except for Tammy. Tammy is absent. Is this the item 10 we needed to?
11.
Item 11, the Enid Municipal Authority rescheduled regular meeting is now in session. Item 11.1, consider a resolution approving and adopting the fiscal year 2018-2019 Enid Municipal Authority Financial Plan.
Okay. Ron, have a little additional information from talking with staff. They feel as though the amount that we have in EEDA for $100,000 for demolition should be sufficient to cover both the fire station and that building on Park that you're discussing. If it's not, we could bring back, once we have quotes in hand, an appropriation at that time to deal with any difference that there may be.
Into the Enid Municipal.
From the municipal authority to EEDA if it's so needed at that time.
One thing I would say is we don't know what hazmat is in that building. We don't know.
You're right.
There's a lot of steps in tearing it down. So certainly, I think when I visited with you earlier, I did mention we had $100,000 in there for tearing down the fire station that we may want to do. If it's possible to do both, we can do that. But I think it's also possible we could add it if they want to do that. So I leave that up to you, commissioners. If you do add it, I believe it's funded now through an EMA transfer to EEDA. But I think Aaron's point is right. But I will say with caution, none of us know exactly what it's going to cost yet.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
But if we add a budget item here, then if we add a budget item here, then it's in the budget and
It would be in the
you
budget,
have-
and I promise you we'll spend it on something. We don't spend it on that. So that's the downside.
More what I mean is will you do it without us doing anything at this agenda? I mean, will you add that building to the demolition
It depends on the costs involved. If the cost involved trigger a contract award level, $50,000, the commission would need to approve that.
To me, it depends on asbestos.
Well, I just mean that if it's not in the budget, then Gerald doesn't really have to go do it. If we put
That's a
an
good
item
point.
in the budget for $1 for the building demolition added to it, then it's in the budget and Gerald's got to go figure it out. My question is, does Gerald going to try to accomplish that building absent?
It does specifically say demolitions, more than one in the budget item, and so I think it would be covered.
So we'd have to go
the
do two
minute
things
And
anyway.
the video would reflect that desire.
That works for me.
Well, make it $100,000 and not,
Well,
if it comes in at $200,000.
I will say the money's there. I realize if apparently the will of the commission is to tear them both down. The intent of that item was just to tear down the fire station. Was there another building included in that line item before now?
No, it was just, we were unsure of what we were going to be able to do for that amount of money at that time.
I know the will of the, quite frankly, unless something else happens at Lahoma Courts, I don't know that tearing down the fire station is going to accelerate anything, although I do know we're working on some possible deals in that area, and certainly we would want to do that. We're also working with other folks there, so that own other properties. So I would certainly want, we've done a lot of demolition. I've done a lot of that, and we can do some more, but demolition alone does not accomplish what our goals are. But anyway, if the money is enough.
Well, downtown it does.
If the 100,000 is enough, I get it that you want to tear down both. I don't know if it'll be enough. That's why I threw in 100,000 for the fire station. I'm fine with whatever you want to do.
Are we on the right item to do that anyway, or? do we
Yes,
still
because
waiting
you
to
would
be-
need to increase, if you're going to increase the budget, you would need to do that if you're.
We
if
then
you're
need
gonna-
to increase the transfer from EMA to EEDA.
Which would leave EMA with a deficit budget for the year.
I'll
Just-
make that motion.
Before we
Wait,
go,
what motion are you going to,
Move $100,000.
100,000 additional? I thought what they said is that they could do both buildings for the $100,000 that already is there. So we don't want to,
Oh, well, if they've got the money there already, sure.
oh, Yahtzee, okay, great.
Put the building on there.
I just remind you, if it's not enough, we will be back, and we will
Yes,
find out.
absolutely.
We don't.
When
have
we
that.
have quotes in
It is,
hand, if
it-
we need additional, we will bring it back to discuss at that point.
Okay.
Okay.
And I will remind you that all of the items in the budget are estimates. So just so you'll know.
We've missed some of those by more than 100%.
So if the will of the commission, it sounds like, is to leave the budget the way it is in EMA and EEDA for demolitions, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
But
Okay.
come back to us if it's not enough.
We will.
I'd move to approve this resolution.
Second.
Motion by Ben, second by George.
Yep.
Would you reread that motion, please?
It was just
Just approve EMA as it's provided. Unchanged.
Further discussion? Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 11.2, approval of claims in the amount of $87,218.65.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ben, second by Jonathan. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 12, will now adjourn to convene as the Enid Economic Development Authority. Item 13, all of the trustees at the Enid Economic Development Authority rescheduled regular meeting are in attendance except for Tammy. Tammy is absent this evening. Item 14, Enid Economic Development Authority rescheduled regular meeting is now in session. Item 14.1, consider resolution approving and adopting the fiscal year 2018-2019 Enid Economic Development Authority financial plan.
Before we make a motion on that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the ERDA allocation, and before making a motion, I'd like to get some questions answered from ERDA, if that's all right. Is that the proper, or do we need a motion first, Carol?
Carol, help.
Can we go ahead and just discuss it in
You
general?
can discuss it.
Okay.
Carol.
Here's my concern.
I want Carol's answer.
She did.
She said, yeah, she said we could.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You can discuss it without making a motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here's generally my concern, and looking at historically, the ERDA allocation for a long time was $600,000 a year and then $550,000 a year last year. We have historically done a couple different things with ERDA. generally ERDA has, and for many years, the intent was to provide a mechanism for smaller dollar incentives to be given out without having to come sit before us, because it just wasn't necessarily rational for a $50,000 or $100,000 economic incentive to come before us. But I think over time, as far as I can determine, the nature of ERDA has shifted as those small dollar incentives have become, I think, less effective tools. ERDA has done fewer of them while shifting its mission towards more of the marketing Enid, the putting together the high dollar deals that require City of Enid involvement, the ADM TIF, the TPNL, even the Love's Travel Plaza, that required really a mechanism from us. And so over time, ERDA has built up an incentive budget and a fund balance in that budget that I don't think is necessary for their continued operation. And what I'd like to get a couple questions answered from Brent, if he could come up. And specifically, here's what I would like to know. From looking at your April 30 financials, there's a net available incentive number of $583,000. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Meaning, and that net available incentive number is what is available to give new incentives, not encumbered funds, not old incentives that are being paid out, but what's available to give new incentives. What would it take from the City of Enid to fund your total operation, all your admin cost, all your copious membership dues and boards, all the travel expense, all the advertising, but not grow that net available incentive number? What would that transfer have to be from us?
First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to answer questions. And so thankful we got Marty Euler here tonight as well. She is our chairperson right now, as well as Jean Anderson. And Debbie Moore also here from our staff, and we're glad to answer any questions that you have. I will tell you our projection for next year, even from what we have right now, is that number would be reduced under 500,000, just because of commitments that we see coming down the line. I will say we have more in our pipeline right now than what those dollars would cover. But to your first point that you made, I think there is probably a little bit of a shift in what ERDA has done, sure, in the last 2 years. And a lot of it's driven by what we listened to downstairs for the last 45 minutes about how important it is to grow the community and get more large water users into our community. I think one of the misconceptions that folks have of that incentive fund is that it's only used for an outlay of dollars to a small business, such as a Warren Cat or a Love's or whatever it might be that comes into play. Sometimes those dollars are used for the ramp up for a larger project, like an ADM or a Coke or some of the others that are coming now. Maybe it is used for travel for a delegation to go somewhere to make a visit in order to make a sale. Sometimes it's for legal fees, for accounting fees, to put a contract together in order to get everybody on the same page before you ever see it. And so to give you a dollar amount, I mean, that's why we say 550,000. That pretty much lets us maintain where we're at right now.
Right, but the question I asked was, what would it take to fund your operations without growing that incentive budget? The admin cost, the travel, the accounting cost, without us adding to your fund balance. I'm not saying I want to make you spend your fund balance for operating, which we do with other funds in the city. When there's a fund balance and we're trying to find money, sometimes we use that fund balance for operation from one year to the next. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have been growing that incentive number. It does not cost $550,000 to operate ERDA. So without growing your incentive budget and without spinning it down for admin, what does it take as a transfer?
Great question. What I'm saying is with what is projected to be expended next year, that incentive balance would actually go down. And so with your administrative dollars plus some of the partnerships we do with Main Street, some of the marketing efforts that are in place right now, the You know, we go on call trips. Also, Lisa is in Vegas right now. We have times that we go to Atlanta and Dallas and Houston and meeting with companies that are interested in moving here or already have assets here. Our projection for next year is that balance would already go down.
Okay, but that doesn't make sense to me, because that fund balance came from the city of Enid writing you a check and it not getting all spent every year. That's where the fund balance came from.
We have been very fiscally conservative the last several years trying to build that up, yes.
Right, but you're telling me that you're going to use all of it for operating, so your operating budget will increase that much next year? That doesn't seem right.
I think the administrative budget is maybe what you're asking. The administrative budget is somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, but we already have commitments in place, like I say, for the internship programs and things like that we do every year that fall underneath the business retention and expansion part of our budget. And then what's left over is what ends up in an incentive fund. And that's what used to be at about $1 million. It dropped down to under $100,000 about 3-4 years ago. And we've been trying to build that back up. We've reduced some of our marketing efforts in order to build that up, because we knew we had a couple of things coming probably in the next 12 months that we wanted to make sure we were prepared for.
And obviously, you can't discuss that.
We can't discuss it.
Well, but your priorities for 2018 that you provided, that you talked to us at the last meeting you were here, I mean, there's some grand priorities, but when you come to an incentive outlay, none of these priorities appear to be on the scale that you're going to be able to address with that fund in the first place. That if we bring, I mean, the soccer complex, we're into our pockets pretty deep, the city of Enid. The Homa Courts development, when we get that project going someday, knock on wood, I hope our folks in Las Vegas are doing wonders today, but that will require outlay from the city of Enid, not ERDA. The residency program, maybe, but that's, I mean, the hospitals are really driving that. A movie theater, which again would be great, that will require capital outlay from the city of Enid to be viable. I like what you're doing. I like that you're out there developing projects for the city of Enid. I don't think you need an economic incentive fund balance, especially in light, to grow rather, especially in light of the idea that you can come to us. I mean, we meet twice a month, and if there's a project that we need to move fast on, I mean, I can commit to you, if you bring us a movie theater deal, we will be very quick to act on that. Or any other development where your available incentive revenue or your available incentive fund is inadequate to address the incentive needed to make a deal. I think that ERDA is doing a great job. I don't know that we need to keep growing that incentive balance. And looking at your financials, they don't change that much year over year. You've been building a balance.
Been trying to build the balance, yes.
But I don't think that that's the best use of the city of Enid's dollars, for you to build a fund balance.
Well, we had reached a point where it had really hampered the ability of the board to make long-term decisions with some of these companies that we were working with. And there was a recognition that we needed more funding in there. I think they've been a little surprised that we're getting questions about not spending enough money, because we've tried to be very fiscally responsible with the dollars that you've entrusted us with, as well as our 60 members that we have and some of our other partners that have contributed as well. But I will tell you, there's been a number of communities that have tried to do exactly what you're saying. Just go in and only fund the administrative efforts of their economic development office. Two great examples are Ardmore and Durant that have tried to do it the last couple of years. And what typically happens in those situations is it eliminates the need for a development alliance board, because at that point I don't need to go to them as business leaders to ask for their input on a project. I go to you in an executive session or in a study session or something like that. The reason why cities fund economic development groups is so that they can have that expertise of an economic development board to do it. The other thing that typically happens is that a lot of the projects become very retail-oriented and not primary job-oriented, because if I'm going to be selling something to you, I want to sell Academy Sports and TJ Maxx and things that are going to directly create sales tax revenues, rather than something with the hospitals that we know is our biggest economic driver here in town and brings our people here. those are two different approaches that you'd make. And whenever you become very city-centric, which is, a lot of towns have done that, it eliminates the focus on the primary jobs part.
But Brent,
would
I don't think
encourage you
that
not to
bears
do that.
out in evidence, and that we've been happy to participate with the ADM project, that we've been excited about everything you've brought us. I don't think we are so short-sighted as to rule out those kind of investments. And further, you would still, if we funded you at the level of $400,000 this year, you would still have a $500,000, $583,000 net available incentive budget for your board to use as it sees fit. And if the day came where that was next year nibbled down to zero, or nibbled down to $100,000, or whatever, if your board was so successful in granting incentives, then we'd have another budget year. I'm just not convinced this is the best use of our money to be growing a fund balance with city dollars, because end of the day, you have partners, you have members, but the lion's share of your funding is this budget line item in the EDA budget.
Well, whenever I came to this community to do economic development, I told the board whenever they hired me, said, I am not going to go to the city council every year and beg for money for our offices. I do not want to do that. I want to make sure that we're a community now that is committed to being aggressive in economic development and wants to put our money where our mouth is. So I have always told the council, we will implement the economic development plan that you want us to implement. I will say $550,000 is quite a bit less than what a lot of other communities do. We've just tried to be very fiscally responsible. We started with 23 members 10 years ago. We've got 60 members now that contribute to our organization. We've got a lot of other partners that we've signed on to that provide revenue to us as well. And so we've tried to leverage those dollars with other dollars in order to increase our impact. Cutting that budget more than $550,000 will affect the way that we do economic development. We will change some of the trips that we go on. We will have to probably come to you whenever we're trying to hire an attorney to put a contract together. There will be some changes to the way that we would operate. Just be aware of that.
Well, but what would be the changes? You have a $583,000 net available incentive number.
It will be much lower than that next year. I can guarantee you that.
Sure, but
just with the things that are in the
$250,000
pipeline right now.
Go ahead, Bill.
Tell us how this will affect your recruiting. You're recruiting in areas that bring jobs to Enid, and they're non-retail jobs.
Well, there's
you have to go out of town to recruit. They're basically not coming.
That's true. We would certainly adjust our travel and wouldn't be near as aggressive being on the road, which my wife would probably be in favor of. But probably the biggest way that it affects us, and without divulging too much information, just in the last several weeks, we've had an instance where we had somebody at the table, and we're asking for a considerable amount of funding from them in order to put a project together here, and they're asking for community support. And we've put $100,000 on the table in order to bring them to the table with their $500,000. And I can't publicly talk about it at this point, but it's one of those situations that if you don't have that money sitting there to be able to leverage their dollars, then I do have to go to an executive session. We do have to have a study session, and then we have to have a public vote, and Jessica will write a wonderful article about it. And and at that point, we might have lost the deal because they needed confidentiality.
You're subject to the Open Records Act and Open Meetings Act, just like we are, Brent. And to take an action that you can take, we can take also. Further, I'm certainly not suggesting by any means that we cut you down to zero and make you spend your fund balance to keep your lights on. I'm simply saying that I think you can do what you're doing without growing that fund balance. And if you're telling me that you won't do what we ask you to, that you won't continue operating, just don't allocate more to the fund balance, that's kind of a separate problem in and of itself. We pay ERDA to serve a purpose for the city of Enid. And we are funding you to serve that purpose. But your financials make it really clear that you can serve that purpose that same admin purpose, those same trips, what you have done for the last 4 years running, that you can do that without growing the incentive budget. And there may not be 4 votes to do anything different, but what I'm suggesting is I want you to do that, but I don't want you to go sock more money away and go on fewer trips. I want you to do the same activities and stop socking money away.
Can I
Sorry.
weigh in on this for a second?
Go ahead.
I don't want to see us become overly aggressive with conservatism to where we lose the morale. I've read your report. I've seen where you all have donated a lot of money and helped a lot of people out. Now, if we're going to do this to them, we got to do it to everybody. There's a lot of different entities that we donate money to. We have to do it to everybody. We need to be fair about how we're spending the money. We need to be fair.
I don't disagree with that aspect of it, but they are one of the only organizations that are maintaining a fund balance at the level in which they're doing, which I don't necessarily disagree with. My disconnect is that as the governing body, if you do have the money and it's pointed in a certain direction, there's a trajectory that's headed for it, I don't have a good enough understanding of what that is in order to be able to be comfortable with it. There's plenty of these other organizations that when it comes to their fund balances, they get depleted at this time of year, and because we have more visibility, at least for those of us who don't sit on the RDA board. So for the rest of us, for us to be able to have a greater understanding, even if it's if at all possible an executive session in order not to to put that, we have to have a greater understanding for that. For me to be comfortable moving forward with something like this is that if this is headed in a certain direction, and the expectation is that in the next 365, that fund balance is going to go down because it's again headed in a certain direction. I don't have a problem with that. I just need to understand why that is and that's the direction that we're going.
Well, and that's probably been the most instructive part through this whole thing. I think I've spoken to all of you in the last week, and Commissioner Zell a number of times about this. And it used to be, whenever I first started, we did have a lot of updates that we did in executive session where we would go through our CRM and show the 70-some projects that we were working today. And really, time has just kind of gotten in the way the last several years. And we've not done near as good a job sharing with you what is in the pipeline at this point. But to talk about a cap on the incentive fund, I guess I would be a little worried about the commission saying we don't want you to ever have more than $500,000 in the fund, because at that point the board might invest in something that's not as good just to make sure that they stayed underneath that cap, and that can be ambiguous from year to year. Is it 400,000? Should it be 700,000?
But Brent, I'm not saying a cap even, but I am saying that your track record over the last few years has been we are making great strides, but ERDA has changed what it's doing in the time I've served with the commission and served with the ERDA board, with fewer small dollar incentives and more large-scale projects, like our TP&L project, like the ADM TIF, like the big retail projects that we would like to see. And I'm happy for that to happen. But Derwin, I don't think this is a case of being overly conservative. God knows nobody calls me conservative, but the idea is that we are responsible with this to make the best use of the city money. And I think we can get exactly the great, fantastic work we're getting from ERDA without writing as big a check, and where we are trying to do more with less, we could take $150,000 and put it elsewhere and make better use of it. We could actually, we have no money in the budget this year for any kind of real trail improvement. We have been taking smaller bites at our quality of life apple, which is also our a big part of our economic development over the last decade has been making those quality of life investments. And we do spend lots and lots of other money on economic development, Brent. We spend, 70, let's see, we have Kurt Rogo's contract, which isn't exactly economic development, but a lot of what you're doing is spending time at the Capitol. We have Main Street focusing on our downtown core. We have the Public Arts Commission, which is certainly economic development if quality of life is. We have retail attractions at $70,000. We have a number of sales tax rebates and TIF payments and TIF debt service payments that are the city of Enid spending economic development dollars because you've brought us projects to do that are just too big for ERDA to swallow. And that's fine, and that's what I want you to keep doing. I want you to keep
And we can't capture those if we're sitting in our office.
Exactly.
Can't do that.
But you can go on, pay all your salaries and go on all your trips and take all your, spend all the money on marketing and not grow your incentive fund balance. That is absolutely on paper feasible.
But I think the intent at this point, if I'm understanding correctly, is that the intent at this point is not to grow the balance, is that this money is pointed into a direction. And so that's why my disconnect is that I can't say that the money could be better used yet because I don't know what the money is.
Because you haven't been in the ERDA meeting.
So be able to make an educated decision about whether or not those funds could be better allocated. I'm just not in a position to do so because it's under a shroud at this particular point.
And that's probably the overarching point here is the faith that this commission would have in the Enid Regional Development Alliance Board to be fiscally responsible with the dollars that you entrust them.
I don't think it's a lack of faith. It's more when the constituents ask us something and ask, where's the money? How come that's there? Or we can't answer the question because, and you're not trying to hide it from us, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that we, without disclosing anything that's sensitive, have to be able to believe that it's being used for a good cause or that it's there because there's an impending requirement that's very important to the city. So I think what you said before about maybe once in a while coming in and talking executive session, just give us, this isn't true, it's not on paper, but you know what, we've got this one, that one, that one. This all sensitive, there's got to be some way that you can better inform us so that we feel more comfortable with a bigger balance. The second question I would say is,
George, finish.
Sorry, sir.
I was in the government for a long time and knew their fiscal years, and one of the things that I despised most was it's the end of the fiscal year. If you don't spend all your money, your budget's going to be cut next year. I hate that. So let me applaud you guys for not doing that, for taking the high road. If you have extra money, it's not let's spend it because the end of the year is here and I'm going to cut my budget if I don't. You take the high road, you put it where it's going to be, you plan for the future. I just think we need to be a little bit more comfortable with what's that balance, what kind of impending need is there for the balance.
Yeah, and my board could tell you, we could have spent it all at our last board meeting.
Yeah.
And we didn't because we knew we had a couple of other things coming and wanted to make sure that we had a balance in place to support those.
Well, but it also wasn't a great project. I mean, that's part of it is that I'm not seeing the small dollar projects that are promising coming to the board.
Jonathan, you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to talk about, I was going to talk about your first point, George, but I'm going to jump on the second point. One of the issues with maintaining and rolling over balances like that, there's nothing wrong with that if it's not going to be used on a worthwhile situation. Right. But when you have other agencies that have worthwhile projects that are having to cut in order to be able to make the budget while they're maintaining a balance, I don't have to just answer to the other people in the city of Enid. I have to answer to these other agencies, police, fire, city, all of these other agencies that need vehicles, that need equipment, that need all of these other things. We have to be able to justify to them that they're maintaining this and there's a reason for it. And so if I can in good conscience tell you what direction that's going and still approve a budget like that, I'm not being responsible with with the worthwhile issues that all these other agencies have to work with and do.
Well, and if one of those agencies, I know whenever my father-in-law was fire chief, you were trying to make sure you had enough money because you had a big ladder truck that needed purchased at sometimes. Being fiscally responsible, saving up that account because you knew that you had that expense coming. We know we have some things coming that we've been trying to build the account for, and to me, that's being fiscally responsible with the dollars.
And it would be nice to have the money there. To me, you are the business recruiting area for the city of Enid. And to have that kind of money in reserve, I think is great. I think you can spend all that money on 2 or 3 items, and I know we have some big items on the board. And to be our recruiting arm is a lot more than some of these areas that we have discussed. They take the money and spend that money, but you take the money and you've got to have that kitty there in order to do your business.
Well,
And you've got to travel. You're not going to bring people to Enid that often without you having gone to be.
Every one of the needs that you guys fund is vitally important. Our role is not to try to adjust the pieces of the pie. Our role is to try to grow the pie for you to get that 3% growth that you were talking about downstairs and trying to get another 5 million gallons of water a day sold. That's what we're trying to do right now.
Well, and I'm not saying, no, I promise none of you, I promise Brent, I promise the ERDA board and the newspaper, I am not saying to cut your operating cost. I am in no way saying cutting your operating cost. I'm saying that you have a fund balance. I'm saying that year after year, you operate at a total admin cost of somewhere between $400,000 to maybe $450,000, kind of depending on the year, that you have been using that excess money from what we have given you year after year to grow your incentive budget, and that we could, for a $150,000 less capital outlay, get the same product out of our great economic development, that we don't stop the trips, that we don't stop the investment, that we don't stop any of that. But, and nor am I saying that the city of Enid is not always here twice a month to partner on a larger incentive. But if it's the city of Enid's money being spent here, and the city of Enid's money being the big dog in the room for ERDA, and if it's our money being spent on incentives, why is it not that we provide a fund balance and not make them spend down their fund balance and retain the fund balance that they can go do the small stuff, but simply recognize as a body that when there are bigger incentives, it doesn't make sense for a $1 million incentive to come out of ERDA's budget. It never will. It will make sense for a $1 million incentive to come out of ours because we want them to have the money available for the smaller stuff. But they don't need to grow it forever, and that no budget is inviolate, that simply saying, well, this is the way it's always been, so we need to continue. I mean, that's not rational when, especially when the function of the body changes over time. How many small dollar incentives have you provided in the last 2 fiscal years? When I asked you at the last meeting, you didn't.
I don't know the number.
But exactly, that's my point. I mean, what are you doing with the incentive budget?
And it would depend on your definition of incentive.
Under $250,000.
Also. You're talking about dollar outlays. There are also a number of things that we do with small businesses that are not handing them a check. Most of the work that we do with small businesses in town is helping them find a location and
right, but you don't need the incentive budget for that.
Well, we use some of our recruitment dollars in order to do that at times, or to prepare a site for them. We partner a lot that way. We do have some partnerships with Main Street, looking at some work on facades this year.
Sure.
I don't know, we've done, several dozen.
But have you given out any incentives to small businesses in Enid under $250,000 in the last 2 fiscal years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, ballpark.
Well, you've got, you have for sure the Warren Cat incentive and the Carlin Group Housing Edition, which was part of our housing study. Those are the first 2 I remember. No Man's Land Beef Jerky was part of that also. Stratus Call Center. So we've had some of those.
Brent, from what you foresee in the future, didn't you say that, I don't want to quote this wrong, but if money's taken from your budget, it would have a pretty big effect on the way you operate, and you'd have to change the way you do things, and pretty much you'd have to keep coming back to us. Every time you cut a deal, you'd have to come back to us, spending a lot of our time making decisions.
Because the budget that I sent Ben, which has not been approved by our board yet, but it is a negative budget for next year, negative budget projection, which means that the incentive would actually go down for next year, just from things that we know the board has made commitments toward for this next round. And if a couple of other things happen here in the next couple of weeks, like what I'm thinking, that incentive budget gets down close to $100,000 again. And at that point, we're probably not looking at deals anymore during board meetings. We're going to have to try to build that back up in order to do it.
So pretty much you'll be using what you have.
Right, and we would come back here if we needed to hire an attorney tomorrow. I would have to ask for a special session probably and get $50,000 because some of the out-of-state lawyers are very expensive, I have learned. It's just going to slow down the process, in my opinion.
Brent, do you receive any funding from any other any other entity other than the City of Enid, like Garfield County or anybody else?
Yep, we've received funding through the OG&E franchise agreement through the city. It actually goes through Garfield County, through the Industrial Authority. And we get some funding through our Northwest Oklahoma Alliance partnership. Like I say, we have 60 members that pay $1,500 a year to be part of our organization as well, which we've continued to get. We've owned some buildings where we get rent on those in order to enhance our revenues as well. That's
Yeah, the
some of
reason
them we received a grant. We're always pursuing grants. We received one last week.
The reason for my question is I know some of the economic development that we bring in, like the TPA now, ends up bringing in ad valorem money that benefits the school system for sure, but also the county. So I'm wondering, are we funding development for the county, and then why aren't they pitching in their share if they're going to be the benefactor of some of that development?
Well, I will say, maybe they could, but we also approve a lot of tax increment finance districts here the last couple of years, which is ad valorem tax that we're using to get deals done, and that has been a marvelous partnership. If you're watching at home, County Commissioners, we want to keep that partnership because that's why Enid is working right now, is because everybody is on the same page. The county gets along with the city, the school district is getting along with everybody. We are the talk of the state right now in our economic development efforts because everybody is putting their oar in the water and going the same direction. That's why we've had the economic impact we have the last couple of years.
It's just a question to educate not only me, but I think some of the other board members as well as others. So by no means am I trying to drive a wedge between this partnership that we have. It's just so that I can better understand who's benefiting from the...
Well, and I mean, part of the ad valorem tax deal too is I would love to see every school district in our region off the state funding formula so that we don't have to worry about what the state does with tax dollars anymore to schools. We can fund our own. We're getting close.
Brent, you mentioned the Garfield County Industrial Authority. What exactly is their role?
Yeah, that's a great question. We contract with them to manage their assets. They own the industrial park on 54th Street around Advanced Pierre Foods. There's about 75 acres there that they work with. Gene serves as the chairman of that. And then they also have some capacity to do tax-exempt bond financing. They haven't done that in several years. But they receive some funds through that flows through to ERDA also.
And they're funded by the county primarily?
Well, they don't really receive funding. They have a static fund balance, but the OG&E franchise payments flow through GCIA.
That's the $30,000 a year.
Yep. Yeah, I think the dollar amount's a little bit more than that, but that's what goes to ERDA.
You have some board members here. Would you like for them to speak? Or
If you don't mind, sir, and if they were willing to. Gene, did you have something you wanted to share?
Different role.
Yes, I'm Gene Anderson. I'm currently the Secretary and Treasurer of the ERDA. I think there's a little bit of confusion being. I'd like to try to address what you're talking about and what your confusion is. I've been on the board now, I think, 2 or 3 years. The $500,000 that we're talking about, and that's not operating money, that is opportunity money for future development. This is the first time since I've been on the board that number has been that great. It's normally, the last couple of years, it's been in the $200,000 range. The reason it jumped from $200,000 to $500,000 at the end of our last fiscal year is simply because we've got about 10 or 12 companies that we're under contract with for incentives, and about 75% of those terminated 12/31/17. So it's just representation on the balance sheet that we have that more dollars to work with companies. So again, it's not operating, it's opportunity money. The other thing you need to consider is what makes up our revenue, and that's primarily 80% of our funds come from you. 550,000 from the city, 30,000 from GCIA, and I think, Brent, with the members, maybe
70,000.
20, 30,000?
About 75,000.
75,000. So you can see, if you take money away from us, we may not even be able to operate.
Well, but Gene, that's not accurate because the operating budget.
Again, think of that 500,000 as opportunity money for us to work with new companies coming on. If we don't have that, we can't work with them. It's that simple.
Sure, and I certainly don't want, and I'm not suggesting that ERDA be required to spend that money to operate. I just don't need.
Yeah, we're not
the
going
number
to
needs
spend
to
it
get
until we
bigger.
have the opportunity to work with people.
Of course, totally on the same page with you 100%.
So that's my 2 cents, but, you know, thank goodness that you all contribute what you do, because without you, we couldn't operate at all. But if you take it away, it hurts our ability to work with new companies.
Those companies,
that's my 2 cents.
those companies that did not reach what they needed to would have gotten the money, but the money was there had they performed or done what the contract asked for.
Yeah. Again, thank you all so much. We appreciate what you do for us so much.
Thank you, Gene.
I don't think what Ben's saying is that we're going to withhold money overall. He's just talking about the process in which they obtain the money in order to be able to do what it is they're talking about doing, not maintaining a fund balance. If they want the money in order to be able to move forward, and it's over, you know, it's an exceeding amount of what it is that they maintain on the balance, that they come back to this body to be able to get that money. Really, this is just a procedural thing that we're talking about, whether or not we're going to continue to move forward with you maintaining that balance. But again, I go back to what my understanding about what it is that you're saying, and you know, this is a faith in my belief in what it is that you're saying is that these funds are going to be used and they're pointed in a direction, and that the intent is that these funds are going to be expended. And so it really is it's just a question about whether or not we believe that those funds are going to be used in the time frame that you're talking about, because it would be a bad move on our part to make you expend those funds in a manner in which you haven't intended to use them at this point if they're pointed to a specific project anyway. We'd be, you know, cutting off our nose to spite our face at this particular, and I mean, that doesn't really make sense. But again, we're still operating under the thought process, most of us, that we don't know what it's pointed towards.
Well, and what I want you to think about, and maybe I'm a little bit misunderstanding what Commissioner Zell is saying also, but I'm hearing you say $500,000 is too much in an incentive account. We don't want $500,000, or we certainly don't want $600,000. $500,000 is enough. So if we have a project come through and we spend $250,000 of that, you know, next month, does that mean we need to come back in July and ask for $250,000 to refurbish that?
Which will be hard for you to give if we approve this budget. It's going to be hard because we will have spent
Go ahead.
the money.
I'll answer the question.
Okay.
You go ahead.
No different than your own household.
I want to bring out one viable point. Kind of dealing with a double-edged sword here too as well. I'm really enjoying this. But the thing is, if we allocate that money somewhere else and it's spent, they come to us and say, hey, we need money and we have a big deal. And we can pay for the water pipeline, but we don't have the money, then what? You can't say it cannot happen, because it can.
That's
Okay,
what I thought I
real
was
quick,
saying.
let me just back up 2 steps here. Here's what I'm thinking is going to happen, just to clarify. I don't think you're going to be giving out small incentives going forward. I think ERDA's role is, over time, going to be bringing us big deals that get funded through a sales tax rebate, Derwin. And a sales tax rebate frequently comes not up front, but after the fact, or borrowed, but serviced by funding that comes in after the fact, or by TIFs. That's what I expect the reality of ERDA is going to be over time, is you putting together and spending all this legwork and huge amounts of time, and of course we want ERDA to do it, but that end of the day, the big stuff, the big meaningful stuff that comes to us is going to be paid for with sales tax rebates and with TIFs. And that that the necessity isn't there, and not just that the money will get spent and not be there, but the necessity doesn't arise for that particular funding mechanism. Certainly not to the extent where you constantly need a replenish fund. I don't know that there is, I don't know that I'm right, and I would love to see our money invested in the community. But I don't think that the best use of the city's money is parking it in a bank account. That I think we want, especially if we're talking economic development, what we want isn't money parked in a bank account for something that might come along. What we want is invested.
Is he right? Is that is that accurate? Because that goes.
Bigger deals or small deals, it's going to change from year to year, to be honest with you.
What's your intent? I mean, do you look for those types of?
This is informative. There are three things that we do. We work with existing businesses here in town to help them grow. I'll bet we spend 80% of our time on that. Doesn't make it in the newspaper, but that's where we spend most of our time. We work with entrepreneurs. We work with the ones that are in the business incubator, those that are starting new businesses here in town. Sometimes we're offsetting a small charge that they might have up front. But right now, there's several of them. We're working with them, trying to help them collect capital, either putting their financial plans together or bringing investors to the table. And then the third area that we work on is bringing the new businesses to town, the big whale, capturing the big whale to come in. And those expenses that we incur are not always an incentive expense. Sometimes it's travel, sometimes it's legal, like I'd mentioned before. We work with all of those. And if we're working with a local business, like there's one right now that's working on a pretty substantial expansion, there may be a role that we play in that. We always try to find every other dollar first. We're going to try to find state dollars or federal dollars or investors. But when we get to the end of the line and there's a $50,000 capital gap, that's whenever I take it to my board and say, hey, we can close a $2 million deal here if we can close this $50,000 gap, and we need to do it today. So
Brent,
you just never know.
I would like for you to talk a little more about the residency program that we need to recruit and bring doctors to the city of Enid.
Well, a lot of that is unfortunately very confidential right now, but we are working.
I understand that.
Here's the
But
public
you need to let us know.
Correct.
I happen to know what you're doing.
Right.
So
The public part of that is that 85% of the physicians that we have in Enid came to Enid through our residency program. And besides water, healthcare is the second most important economic development issue for it. It's the reason people come here from all of Northwest Oklahoma to shop and spend their money. And if we're going to have a vibrant healthcare industry, we've got to have residents. And I mentioned 80% of our time is spent on local businesses. I would say 90% of our time is spent on that right now, trying to get something put together there. And yeah, a lot of time's been spent.
we ought to be able to visualize what a residency program will do that we lost from the two big hospitals. We need to get it. You're right about us being the medical facility for all of Northwest Oklahoma. They pass through a lot of towns that have a hospital to get to Enid.
Well, I think this has been instructive. I think that ERDA's function has shifted, that all that great work you do locally could be done with your admin budget. I don't want to give the impression that I or anyone else doesn't appreciate what's being done. I also don't want to give the impression that the city of Enid isn't entitled to this level of oversight and observe and make some change when we observe it. I mean, ERDA has changed a lot just since you and I have been, since I've been here 5 years. And will continue to change. And as you continue to bring us big projects that may simply require more than what you can spend, you'll still be doing that day-to-day work regardless. I think that it's been an instructive evening. I would move that we amend the EEDA budget to allocate $450,000 to ERDA in lieu of the $550,000 while encouraging you to come to us in the future. And there may or may not be support for it, but I think that you can do what you do with less hard dollar from us. But regardless, it was instructive.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Is that a motion?
It was a motion. I think it may die for lack of a second, but by God, if that fund balance keeps growing and we end up with $1 million there, I think that we will have been at a loss for the money the good that we could have done with that money elsewhere in this community.
I don't disagree. If we're having the same conversation next year,
Hearing no second, we're moving on. Item 14.2, approval of claims in the
Mayor, we still need to vote on that item.
Still got to vote.
Keeping you awake.
I motion to approve the item as.
Second.
Is that item 14.1, Aaron?
Correct.
Which
Budget as presented.
we need to approve that, and then Ben's motion died for lack of a second.
Yes, I think Jonathan just made a motion to approve
As written.
14.1.
Which includes their funds at $550,000.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Further discussion? Please cast your vote. Motion carries 4-2. Item 14.2. Approval of claims in the amount of $171,950.91.
So moved.
Motion by Ben.
Second.
Second by George. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 15, we will now adjourn to convene as the Enid Public Transportation Authority. Item 16, all of the trustees of the Enid Public Transportation Authority rescheduled regular meeting are in attendance except for Tammy. Tammy's absent this evening. Item 17, the Enid Public Transportation Authority rescheduled regular meeting is now in session. Item 17.1, consider a resolution approving and adopting the fiscal year 2018-2019 Enid Transportation Authority Financial Plan.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ben, second by Jonathan. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 17.1, approve claims in the amount of $680.58.
Motion to approve.
Motion
Second.
by Jonathan, second
Second.
by George. Please cast your vote. Motion carries 6-0. Item 18, we will now adjourn to reconvene as the Enid City Commission. Item 19, public comments. Diane? Need your name and address, please.
Diane Levesque, 1324 West Oak Avenue, and I wasn't sure I was able to get up off that chair just now. Anyway, I did have some rollover from about the budget, but I have a couple items that are non-budget, so that's why I chose this particular point in time to address them. And yet there was some things that just came up that I would like to address, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to go over my 5 minutes.
I will let you know when 5 minutes are here.
I appreciate that.
There'll be a 58 on that clock, 7:58. Go ahead.
Okay. And
Go
that
ahead.
was on my time, too. Well, as long as I'm going to roll over whatever I don't get to tonight,
I'll
I'm
give you
just
5 minutes from right now, Diane.
all right.
7:59. Fire
That's
away.
fair enough.
Fire
I just
away.
want to celebrate the contract y'all just approved with the people who are paying my pension. That's Motorola, Schaumburg, Illinois. Go Batwings. Okay. About the study session with regards to the CAW pipeline, that is a current topic, but it also impacts the budget. And this nice little discussion about ERDA, it also applies to the CAW pipeline insofar as when the CAW project is completed, you can consider that to be an industrial incentive to large companies. One objection to the ERDA that my supporters I know have, as well as do I, are deals like with StarTech. But that's not entirely the ERDA's purview. They've attracted StarTech here, but it's your guys to retain whatever we attract here. And that wasn't the case with StarTech. They wanted the money, they got the incentive, when the incentive expired, they took the money and ran. Let's not do that again, people, okay? So, also in the study session came up this little sell more water syndrome. You get more revenue to pay for the CAW pipeline if you sell more water, but we're on the even odd ration that nobody's enforcing, so much for enforcing city code. But I want to bring up the similar syndrome with Meadow Lake Golf Course, which came up as a budget item. The concern that was voiced there was if we don't pay for good facilities at Meadow Lake Golf Course, they're going to go to, guess what, a commercial entity called Pheasant Run. Now, considering that y'all revenue is highly dependent on commercial intake, you're basically shooting yourself in your foot if you're not letting Pheasant Run have more customers. Are you not? Just a thought. Okay. Yes, you made a comment earlier, Mr. Gilbert, something completely different. Consultant expertise doesn't always pay off, and I say unto you, you get what you pay for. Pretty much like ERDA's dealing with people that they want to attract. We got money, we're going to throw it at you. You do this study for us, they give you the study, they tell you what you want, take the money and run. Let's not do that anymore, okay? Now, what we have is a situation with street crews. Mr. Gilbert, you also said that we had a small crew, so all the money is going on street maintenance, and we're celebrating that because that's been in bad neglect for, I'd say, decades. But your alleys, I say unto you that when you have derelict alleys, you have no standing to complain about people's property upkeep. Because I say unto you also, polycarts in the front of any property, especially if it's a large property, well manicured and not all that, does not add to the property value. I am here to say unto you that your alleys are important in terms of property value. And yeah, I'll roll over till next time.
Please wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you for joining us for the Enid City Commission meeting. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition on channel 112. In addition, the council meeting is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.